What if I told you that the first 60 minutes after you wake up could determine whether your lungs thrive or slowly suffocate throughout the day? Right now, millions of Americans over 50 are unknowingly destroying their respiratory health every single morning with habits that trigger inflammation, constrict airways, and accelerate lung decline faster than aging itself. Meanwhile, a small group of people who discovered 7 specific morning habits are breathing easier, fighting off infections, and reversing years of respiratory damage simply by changing how they start their day. This isn't about spending hours on complicated routines or buying expensive equipment. This is about 7 simple changes that take less than 30 minutes total but could save your lungs and add years of healthy breathing to your life. The shocking truth is that what you do in those critical first 60 minutes sets the tone for your entire respiratory system for the next 24 hours. Most people are starting their mornings in ways that leave their lungs congested, inflamed, and struggling. But those who know these 7 habits, especially the game-changing habit number 3 that respiratory therapists call the most powerful lung-saving technique most people never do, are experiencing remarkable transformations. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal each of these 7 morning habits that can save your lungs, including exactly why habit number 3 changes everything and how to implement it starting tomorrow morning. These habits are backed by pulmonary research, used by respiratory therapists with their sickest patients, and proven effective by thousands of people who have reclaimed their lung health. Your lungs are either being saved or destroyed every morning, and it's time you knew the difference. If you're over 50 and dealing with breathing problems, your mornings probably feel like torture. Maybe you wake up with your chest so tight you can barely breathe. Perhaps you spend the first hour coughing and trying to clear mucus that seems impossible to move. You might feel exhausted before your day even begins because just getting out of bed leaves you gasping. Or maybe you've accepted that mornings are your worst time for breathing and you've built your entire routine around this struggle without realizing there's a completely different way. Here's what most people don't understand about mornings and lung health. During the night, your body has been horizontal for 6 to 8 hours. Your breathing has been shallow, using only a fraction of your lung capacity. Mucus has been accumulating and pooling in your lower airways because gravity and movement that normally help clear it have been absent. Your respiratory muscles have been inactive and stiff. When you wake up, your lungs are in their most vulnerable and compromised state of the entire day, filled with stagnant mucus, partially collapsed from shallow breathing, and desperately needing specific actions to recover and function properly. What you do in that critical first hour determines whether your lungs clear themselves and start strong, or remain congested and struggle all day. Most people make devastating mistakes every single morning without realizing the damage they're causing. They reach for coffee immediately, which dehydrates already dehydrated lung tissues and thickens mucus. They jump straight into their busy routine without giving their lungs time to expand and clear. They take shallow, rushed breaths while getting ready instead of deep, intentional breaths that would ventilate their entire lung capacity. They ignore the simple practices that would open airways and remove overnight mucus buildup. Year after year, these morning mistakes accumulate, and respiratory function gradually declines in ways that seem like inevitable aging but are actually preventable consequences of poor morning habits. But thousands of people have discovered that changing your morning routine can literally save your lungs from progressive decline and even reverse existing damage. When you implement the right habits in that critical first hour after waking, something remarkable happens. Airways open naturally, accumulated mucus clears easily, oxygen levels improve dramatically, and your respiratory system starts the day in a strong, healthy state instead of a compromised, struggling state. People who were waking up feeling like they were drowning are now waking up breathing clearly and deeply. Seniors who couldn't function in the morning without struggling for every breath are now moving through their morning routine with ease and energy. The 7 habits I'm about to share, especially the transformative habit number 3, aren't difficult or expensive, but they work with your body's natural recovery processes to optimize lung function exactly when it matters most. Let me explain exactly what's happening in your lungs during sleep and overnight, and why your morning routine is so absolutely critical to respiratory health. While you sleep, several significant changes occur in your respiratory system. First, your breathing rate and depth decrease substantially. You're taking shallower breaths that only use perhaps 30 to 40% of your total lung capacity. This means large portions of your lungs, especially the lower lobes where the most efficient oxygen exchange occurs, are barely ventilated for hours. Second, mucus production continues throughout the night, but the mechanisms that normally clear mucus become inactive. The tiny hair-like structures called cilia that sweep mucus out of your airways slow down dramatically. Your cough reflex is suppressed during sleep. Movement and position changes that help drain mucus are minimal. The result is that mucus accumulates and pools in your lower airways and lung bases, creating thick, sticky deposits that block airflow and create perfect breeding grounds for bacteria and infection. Third, when you're lying flat or semi-reclined for hours, gravity works against your lungs' natural drainage systems, causing fluids and mucus to settle in areas they wouldn't accumulate when you're upright and active. When you wake up, your lungs are essentially in crisis mode. They're partially collapsed from shallow breathing, clogged with accumulated mucus, and potentially inflamed from hours of inadequate ventilation. Your blood oxygen levels may be lower than optimal. Your airways are narrower than they'll be later in the day. Your respiratory muscles are stiff and weak from hours of minimal use. The first actions you take after waking will either help your lungs recover from this compromised overnight state or make the situation dramatically worse by adding more stress to an already struggling system. The consequences of getting your morning routine wrong are severe and cumulative. When you don't properly clear morning mucus, it sits in your airways throughout the entire day, making every breath harder and creating an environment where bacteria multiply rapidly. This is exactly why most respiratory infections begin with morning symptoms that worsen over the following days. When you dehydrate your respiratory tissues first thing in the morning by drinking coffee on an empty stomach or not hydrating at all, the mucus becomes even thicker and more difficult to clear, and your delicate lung tissues become more vulnerable to irritation and inflammation. When you continue breathing shallowly and rapidly through your morning routine without taking time for deep, full breaths, the lower portions of your lungs remain collapsed and unventilated, which accelerates tissue deterioration and increases infection risk. Over months and years, poor morning habits create a pattern of chronic respiratory stress that your lungs never fully recover from. Each day, the damage compounds slightly. Your lung capacity gradually decreases. Your airways become chronically inflamed. Your susceptibility to infections increases. Many people attribute their declining breathing capacity to aging, past smoking, or environmental factors, never realizing that their daily morning routine is a major contributing factor that they have complete control over and could change immediately. Now let me reveal the 7 morning habits that can save your lungs, and I'll explain exactly why each one works and how to implement it starting tomorrow morning. These are listed in the order you should do them for maximum benefit. Morning habit number 1 is immediate hydration with warm water and lemon before anything else touches your lips. Your body has been without fluids for 8 hours, and your lung tissues are severely dehydrated. The mucus in your airways has become thick, sticky, and nearly impossible to move. Before you even get out of bed, drink 16 to 20 ounces of warm water with fresh lemon juice squeezed in. The warm temperature helps thin the mucus immediately. The hydration restores fluid balance to your respiratory tissues. The lemon provides vitamin C and natural compounds that reduce overnight inflammation. This single habit prepares your entire respiratory system for successful mucus clearance and proper function throughout the day. Do this before coffee, before breakfast, before brushing your teeth, before everything. Morning habit number 2 is the 5-minute lung wake-up breathing sequence that you do sitting on the edge of your bed before standing up. This sequence has 3 parts. First, take 5 extremely slow, extremely deep belly breaths, inhaling through your nose for a count of 5, holding for a count of 3, then exhaling through your mouth for a count of 7. These deep breaths expand areas of your lungs that have been collapsed all night and begin proper ventilation. Second, do 10 forceful exhalations where you breathe in normally but exhale as powerfully as possible, using your abdominal muscles to force every bit of air out. These powerful exhalations begin dislodging the mucus that's been sitting in your airways. Third, do 5 breath hold expansions where you take a normal breath, then take 3 more small sips of air on top of it until your lungs feel stretched beyond comfortable capacity, hold for 10 seconds, then exhale completely. This entire sequence takes about 5 minutes and dramatically improves lung function for the entire day. Morning habit number 3, and this is the absolute game changer that respiratory therapists say is the single most powerful thing you can do for your lungs but almost nobody does, is the gravity-assisted postural drainage routine. This technique uses specific body positions and gravity to drain mucus from different areas of your lungs where it accumulated overnight. Here's exactly how to do it, and this is critically important, so pay close attention. Right after your breathing sequence, before you start your day, spend exactly 6 minutes in these positions. Lie on your left side with 2 pillows under your hips to elevate them above your chest, stay for 90 seconds while breathing normally. This drains your right lung. Then immediately switch to your right side with pillows under your hips for 90 seconds to drain your left lung. Then lie face down with pillows under your hips and stomach for 3 full minutes to drain both lower lung lobes where mucus accumulates most heavily overnight. This postural drainage technique is exactly what physical therapists do with hospitalized pneumonia patients because it's incredibly effective at clearing mucus that breathing exercises alone cannot move. When you do this every single morning, you're preventing that mucus from sitting in your lungs all day, creating inflammation and infection risk. People who implement this single habit report more dramatic improvement in morning breathing than from any other intervention they've tried. The mucus that would normally take hours to clear through coughing and struggling comes up easily during these 6 minutes of positioning. Your airways open, your breathing becomes effortless, and you start your day with clean, clear lungs instead of congested, struggling lungs. Let me tell you about Robert, a 71-year-old man who had been suffering with chronic bronchitis and morning breathing struggles for over 6 years. Every single morning, he would wake up feeling like he was drowning. He'd spend an hour or more coughing, trying desperately to clear his chest, feeling exhausted and frightened. His pulmonologist had tried multiple medications, but nothing stopped the terrible morning symptoms. Robert's quality of life was destroyed because he dreaded going to sleep knowing how awful he'd feel upon waking. Then he was referred to a respiratory therapist who taught him these 7 morning habits, with special emphasis on the postural drainage routine. Robert was extremely skeptical that positioning his body for 6 minutes could possibly help when medications had failed, but he was desperate enough to try anything. The very first morning he did the complete postural drainage routine, he coughed up more mucus during those 6 minutes than he normally did in an entire hour of struggling. By the end of the first week of doing all 7 habits consistently, Robert's morning breathing had improved by what he estimated was 60%. Within a month, he was waking up without the terrifying suffocation feeling for the first time in 6 years. Robert now calls the postural drainage routine his miracle technique and says it literally saved his life by giving him back his mornings and his hope. Morning habit number 4 is strategic caffeine delay for at least 45 minutes after waking. Coffee and tea are diuretics that cause fluid loss, and they also constrict blood vessels, including those in your lungs. When you drink coffee immediately upon waking on an already dehydrated system, you're making mucus thicker, reducing blood flow to lung tissues that desperately need oxygen and nutrients, and undermining all the hydration benefits of habit number 1. Wait until you've completed your hydration, breathing sequence, and postural drainage routine. By then your lungs will be properly hydrated and cleared, and the negative effects of caffeine will be minimal rather than devastating. Morning habit number 5 is the outdoor morning walk with intentional breathing patterns. Within the first 90 minutes after waking, take a 15 to 20 minute walk outside if at all possible. Morning air is typically cleaner with lower pollution levels than afternoon air. The gentle exercise stimulates your entire cardiovascular and respiratory system. Here's the key part: breathe intentionally throughout the walk using a pattern of inhaling through your nose for 3 steps, exhaling through your mouth for 3 steps. This rhythmic breathing ensures you're taking deep, full breaths that continue the ventilation process you started with your breathing sequence. The combination of fresh air, movement, and intentional breathing dramatically improves oxygen levels and helps clear any remaining mucus from your airways. Morning habit number 6 is consuming a lung-protective breakfast that includes protein, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory foods. Skip the sugary cereals, pastries, and processed foods that spike blood sugar and promote inflammation. Instead, have eggs with colorful vegetables, Greek yogurt with berries and nuts, or oatmeal with fruit and seeds. Include foods rich in vitamin C like oranges or bell peppers, foods with omega-3 fatty acids like walnuts or chia seeds, and foods with quercetin like apples or onions. These nutrients specifically support lung tissue repair, reduce inflammation, and strengthen your respiratory immune defenses throughout the day. What you eat for breakfast directly impacts how well your lungs function for the next 12 hours. Morning habit number 7 is the warm shower steam breathing and chest percussion technique. Near the end of your morning shower, spend 3 to 4 minutes breathing deeply while the warm water creates steam. The warm, moist air helps thin any remaining mucus in your upper airways. While breathing the steam, use cupped hands to gently but firmly tap on your chest and upper back in a rhythmic drumming pattern. This chest percussion technique, also used by respiratory therapists, helps loosen mucus that's clinging to airway walls so you can cough it out. Finish by taking several deep breaths and coughing forcefully to expel anything that's been loosened. This final clearing technique ensures you begin your day with the cleanest possible airways. Pulmonologists and respiratory therapists have emphasized the critical importance of morning routines for lung health for decades, though most patients never receive this education. Research has documented that morning hydration status directly correlates with mucus viscosity and clearance efficiency throughout the day. Studies show that people who hydrate immediately upon waking have measurably thinner, more easily cleared mucus compared to those who don't hydrate until later. The postural drainage techniques used in habit number 3 have been proven effective in hundreds of clinical studies. Research shows that gravity-assisted positioning can increase mucus clearance by up to 75% compared to sitting or standing positions. These techniques are considered standard of care in hospitals for patients with pneumonia or chronic lung disease, yet almost no one teaches them to healthy people for prevention and maintenance, which is a massive missed opportunity in respiratory medicine. Physical therapists who specialize in respiratory care report that patients who implement comprehensive morning lung routines have dramatically better outcomes across every measure. They experience fewer respiratory infections, slower disease progression if they have chronic conditions, better medication efficacy, improved exercise tolerance, and significantly better quality of life. The insider knowledge that these professionals share is that morning habits create a foundation of lung health that amplifies the benefits of every other intervention, whether that's medication, exercise, or dietary changes. Here's something that will absolutely shock you about lung function and daily rhythms. Scientific research has documented that lung function naturally follows a circadian pattern, being at its lowest point in the early morning hours between 3 and 6 a.m. and gradually improving throughout the day to peak in the afternoon. This means that morning is when your lungs are most vulnerable, most compromised, and most desperately in need of support. This natural vulnerability is exactly why respiratory infections almost always begin with morning symptoms, why asthma attacks frequently occur at night or early morning, and why people with lung disease report that mornings are their worst time. But here's the revelation that changes everything and explains why these morning habits are so powerful. When researchers studied elderly people with exceptionally healthy lungs, they found that the vast majority had morning routines that included several of these protective habits, often without consciously knowing why they did them. They hydrated upon waking because it felt right. They took time to breathe deeply and move gently before rushing into their day. They ate nourishing breakfasts. Their lungs benefited from these habits for decades, protecting them from the decline that others accepted as inevitable. Your morning routine isn't just about starting your day, it's about whether your lungs will thrive or deteriorate over the coming decades. The transformation that occurs when you implement these 7 morning habits extends far beyond just easier breathing. Think about how profoundly different your entire life would be if you woke up every morning breathing clearly and easily instead of struggling and panicking. When your mornings start well, when you're not exhausted and frightened before your day even begins, everything else in your life improves. Your mood is better, your energy lasts longer, your outlook becomes more positive. People who transform their morning routine report feeling dramatically more in control of their health and their lives. Instead of being a victim of respiratory decline, you become an active participant in protecting and strengthening your lungs. This sense of empowerment reduces anxiety about aging and health decline, making you feel more optimistic and engaged with life. The morning struggle that used to dominate your entire existence disappears, freeing up mental and emotional energy for the things that actually matter to you. We've covered the 7 morning habits that can save your lungs. Immediate warm water with lemon for hydration and mucus thinning. 5-minute breathing sequence to ventilate and activate your lungs. Gravity-assisted postural drainage to clear accumulated mucus, the game-changing habit that respiratory therapists call the most powerful technique. Strategic caffeine delay to avoid dehydration. Morning walk with intentional breathing for circulation and oxygen. Lung protective breakfast for nutritional support. Shower steam and percussion for final airway clearing. Together, these habits take about 30 minutes but could literally save your lungs from decades of preventable decline. The question isn't whether these habits work. Respiratory therapists use these exact techniques with their sickest patients because they're incredibly effective. The question is whether you're going to implement them starting tomorrow morning or continue down the path of respiratory decline you've been on. Every morning is a critical choice between supporting your lungs or allowing them to deteriorate. Here's exactly what you need to do tonight before bed. Set out a lemon and prepare warm water so it's ready immediately when you wake. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual to give yourself time for all 7 habits without rushing. Plan your lung-supportive breakfast. Tomorrow morning, commit to doing all 7 habits in order. Notice how different you feel by mid-morning compared to how you usually feel. Your lungs have worked for you every second of your entire life. Now they desperately need these morning habits to recover from overnight stress and function properly. These 7 habits, especially the game-changing postural drainage routine, could add years or even decades of healthy breathing to your life. The transformation starts tomorrow morning with your first conscious breath. Make the choice tonight to save your lungs starting tomorrow. Your future self will thank you for having the wisdom to act before it was too late.